My mother's scream that night still echoes in my dreams, even now, years later, from behind these prison walls. It wasn't just the sound of anger or disappointment. It was the sound of a heart breaking, of a love so deep it couldn't find words, only pain. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I destroyed everything my Jewish mother held sacred. How I burned down not just our house, but every bridge that connected us, every memory that made us family. I grew up in Edison, New Jersey, in one of those neighborhoods where everyone knows everyone, where your mother's friends watch you grow up from their kitchen windows, where the smell of challah bread baking on Friday afternoons drifts from house to house like an invisible thread connecting all the Jewish families on our street. My mother, Sarah, was the heart of our home, a woman who could make you feel like the most important person in the world with just one of her smiles. She had this way of touching your face when she talked to you, her palm warm against your cheek, like she was trying to memorize you, trying to hold on to every moment. My father, Robert, was quieter, the kind of man who showed his love through actions rather than words. He'd wake up at 5 every morning to go to his job at the accounting firm, his footsteps careful on the stairs so he wouldn't wake us. On Sundays, he'd take me to the park and teach me how to throw a baseball, his patience endless, even when I kept missing the catch. He never raised his voice, never lost his temper until that night, until he saw what I'd done to myself, to our family, to everything they'd tried to build. You see, I was 20 years old when everything fell apart, though the cracks had been forming for years before that. Growing up in a traditional Jewish household when you're questioning everything about yourself is like wearing a suit that's 3 sizes too small. It pinches in all the wrong places, makes it hard to breathe, hard to move the way you want to move. Every Friday night, we'd gather for Shabbat dinner, the candles flickering on the table while my mother recited the prayers in Hebrew, her voice like honey, sweet and thick with tradition. I remember sitting at that table, watching the light dance across my mother's face as she blessed the bread, and feeling like I was watching from outside a window, like I was a stranger looking in at someone else's life. My younger sister Rebecca would kick me under the table when I didn't respond to the prayers fast enough, her 12-year-old righteousness already more developed than my 20 years of reluctant participation. She was everything they wanted in a child, eager to learn Hebrew, excited about her upcoming bat mitzvah, while I counted the minutes until I could escape to my room. The truth is, I loved my family. I need you to understand that, because everything that happened next might make it seem like I didn't, but I did. I loved the way my mother would sneak into my room at night to pull my blanket up over my shoulders, thinking I was asleep. I loved how my father would leave little notes in my lunchbox even when I was in high school, embarrassing notes that said things like, "Make good choices today, Danny boy." I loved how Rebecca would crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, her small body shaking until I'd tell her stories about brave knights and dragons to distract her from the lightning. But love and belonging are 2 different things, and I'd never felt like I belonged. Not in the synagogue where Rabbi Goldstein would drone on for what felt like hours about traditions and obligations. Not in Hebrew school where the other kids seemed to absorb the teachings like sponges, while I sat there feeling like I was drowning in words I didn't understand and rules I didn't want to follow. Not even at home, where every room was filled with reminders of a heritage I was supposed to cherish, but that felt like chains around my ankles. My parents tried, God knows they tried. My mother would sit with me for hours, going over Hebrew letters until my eyes burned and my head ached. "Daniel," she'd say, her hand on mine, "this is who we are. This is thousands of years of history, of survival, of beauty. How can you not want to be part of that?" And I'd look at her, at the hope in her eyes, and I'd lie. I'd tell her I was trying, that I understood, that it would click for me eventually, but it never did. The summer I turned 18, I met Marcus. He was working at the gas station near our house, and we started talking one day when I was filling up my beat-up Honda Civic. He was different from anyone I'd ever met, covered in tattoos, each one telling a story of rebellion and freedom. He introduced me to a world I didn't know existed, a world where you could question everything, where tradition was something to break free from, not something to worship. Marcus lived in a run-down apartment on the other side of town, the kind of place my parents would have called dangerous if they'd known I was going there. His walls were covered with posters of bands I'd never heard of, and his shelves were full of books about different ways of thinking, different ways of being. He introduced me to his friends, a group of guys who met in his basement to talk about philosophy and politics and all the ways the world was broken. They made me feel smart, made me feel like my questions weren't wrong, like my desire to break free wasn't something to be ashamed of. That's when I first learned about the Facebook group. Marcus showed it to me one night after we'd been drinking, his laptop open on the coffee table between us. "These guys get it," he said, scrolling through posts that talked about strength and power and taking control of your own destiny. "They understand that some people are just meant for more, that all this equality bullshit is just keeping the strong from rising. I should have seen the warning signs. I should have recognized the symbols, the coded language, the hatred dressed up as philosophy. But I was 20 years old and angry and desperate to belong somewhere. Anywhere that wasn't the suffocating world of my parents' expectations. The group welcomed me with open arms, called me brother, told me I was special, that I was one of them. They had a way of making you feel like you'd finally found your people, like you'd been wandering in the desert and suddenly stumbled upon an oasis. The initiation was simple, they said. Just a tattoo, a symbol that would mark me as one of them, that would show the world I wasn't afraid to stand for something. They all had it, they told me, lifting their shirts to show me the matching ink across their chests. It meant strength, they said. It meant brotherhood. It meant freedom from the weak ideologies that kept people like us down. I knew what it really was. Deep down, in that place where truth lives, no matter how many lies we tell ourselves, I knew. But I got it anyway. I walked into that tattoo parlor on a Tuesday afternoon, my hands shaking but my jaw set with determination. The artist looked at the design I showed him and hesitated. "You sure about this, kid?" he asked, and I told him I'd never been more sure of anything in my life. The needle burned as it carved the symbol into my skin, each line a declaration of war against everything my parents had tried to teach me. I watched in the mirror as it took shape across my chest, black ink against pale skin, and I felt something inside me shift. There was no going back now. I was marking myself not just with ink, but with intention. This was my declaration of independence, my way of saying I chose my own path. I came home that night drunk on cheap whiskey and adrenaline, my chest wrapped in plastic wrap and medical tape. The house was quiet when I walked in, just the sound of the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking away the seconds. I should have gone straight to my room. I should have kept the secret a little longer, given myself time to think, to plan. But I was 20 and stupid and full of liquid courage, and I wanted them to see. I wanted them to know that I wasn't their little boy anymore, that I'd chosen my own way. I found my mother in the kitchen, cleaning up from dinner. She looked up when I walked in, and her face lit up the way it always did when she saw me. "Daniel, bubbler, you missed dinner. Let me heat you up a plate." She was already moving toward the refrigerator when I stopped her. "Mom, I need to show you something." My voice was slurred, but steady. I pulled off my shirt, peeling away the plastic wrap to reveal the fresh tattoo beneath. For a moment, she just stared, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. Then recognition dawned, and the plate she was holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on the tile floor. "No!" she whispered, and then louder, "No, no, no!" She stumbled backward, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. "Daniel, tell me this isn't real. Tell me this is some sick joke." "It's not a joke, Mom. This is who I am now. This is what I believe." The words felt foreign in my mouth, like I was reading from a script someone else had written. But I'd committed to this performance, and I was going to see it through. "That symbol," She could barely get the words out. Do you know what that symbol means? Do you know what it represents? Tears were streaming down her face now, and she was shaking her head back and forth like she could make it disappear if she just denied it hard enough. It represents strength, I said, parroting the words I'd been taught. It represents taking control of my own life instead of following your outdated traditions. Outdated traditions? Her voice cracked. Daniel, my grandmother died in the camps. Your great-grandmother was murdered by people who wore that symbol. How could you do this to us, to her memory? That's ancient history, I said, the whiskey making me cruel. This is about now. This is about me choosing my own path instead of being forced into yours. That's when she said it, the words that changed everything. Then you're no longer welcome in this house. Her voice was quiet now, deadly quiet. I won't have that symbol under my roof. I won't have that hatred in my home. I laughed, actually laughed, because it seemed so absurd. You're kicking me out, your own son, over a tattoo. That's not just a tattoo, she said, and now there was steel in her voice, a strength I'd never heard before. That's a declaration of war against everything we are, everything we've survived. If you can wear that on your body, if you can mark yourself with the symbol of our destruction, then you're not my son anymore. Mom! Rebecca's voice came from the doorway. She must have heard the plate break, must have come down to see what was happening. She looked between us, confusion and fear on her young face. What's going on? Go back to bed, sweetheart, my mother said, never taking her eyes off me. Your brother is just leaving. Sarah! My father's voice now, heavy with sleep as he came down the stairs. What's all the... He stopped when he saw us, saw my bare chest, saw the tattoo. I watched the colour drain from his face, watched his hands curl into fists at his sides. Robert, don't! My mother started to say, but it was too late. My father, the man who had never raised a hand to me in 20 years, crossed the room in 3 strides and struck me with his open palm. The force of it sent me stumbling backward, my hip catching the edge of the counter as I fell. Get out, he said, his voice shaking with rage. Get out of my house right now. I pushed myself up, my cheek burning, my chest burning, everything burning. Fine, I said, spitting the word at them like it was poison. You want me gone? I'm gone. But mark my words, you'll pay for this. You'll pay for choosing your stupid traditions over your own son. I stormed upstairs, Rebecca crying in the hallway as I passed her. I threw clothes into a duffel bag, knocked everything off my dresser in rage, punched the bathroom mirror hard enough to leave blood on the splintered glass. When I came back down, they were still in the kitchen, my mother holding my father back, both of them looking at me like I was a stranger. I'll be back, I said, and there was a promise in those words, a threat. This isn't over. I called Marcus from my car, my hands still shaking, my face still stinging from my father's slap. They kicked me out, I told him when he answered. Can I crash at your place? Of course, brother, he said, and there was something like satisfaction in his voice. You're family now, real family. That night, sitting on Marcus's stained couch with a beer in my hand and my new brothers around me, I told them what had happened. They listened with sympathy, with understanding, with rage on my behalf. They chose their outdated beliefs over their own blood, Ryan, one of the older members, said. That's what those people do. They put their tribe above everything else, even their own children. You did the right thing, another guy said. You stood up for what you believe in. That takes balls. They made me feel like a hero, like I'd done something brave instead of something terrible. They fed my anger, nurtured it, helped it grow from a spark into a flame. Every story they told about their own families, their own rejections, their own battles against the people who tried to hold them back made me feel more justified in my choice. But late that night, lying on Marcus's couch in the dark, I couldn't shake the image of my mother's face when she saw the tattoo. The horror in her eyes wasn't just about the symbol, I realized. It was about losing me. It was about watching her son choose hatred over love, watching 20 years of hopes and dreams crumble in an instant. I pushed the guilt away. They had kicked me out, I reminded myself. They had chosen their traditions over me. They were the ones who had broken our family, not me. But even as I repeated these justifications to myself, I knew I was lying. I had chosen this. I had walked into that tattoo parlor knowing exactly what it would mean, exactly what it would cost. I had traded my family for a group of strangers who told me I was special, who made me feel powerful, who validated all my worst impulses. The next week, I drove by my parents' house every night. I'd park down the street and watch the lights in the windows, watch the shadows move behind the curtains. I saw my mother in the kitchen window once, washing dishes, and even from that distance I could see that something was different about her. She moved slower, like she was carrying extra weight. My father came up behind her, put his arms around her, and they stood there together, holding each other up. That's when the first idea came to me. If they could throw me away so easily, if they could cast me out like I was nothing, then I would show them what nothing looked like. I would take away the things they loved, the things they valued more than their own son. I would make them understand what it felt like to lose everything. I started with the spray paint. Marcus came with me, keeping watch while I covered their driveway and garage door with symbols, with words I can't repeat here, with all the hatred I'd been taught to feel. My hands were steady as I worked, each stroke of the paint an act of revenge. When we drove away, I felt a sick sort of satisfaction. Let them wake up to that, I thought. Let the whole neighborhood see what they really are. My mother called me the next day, sobbing. "Daniel, please," she begged. "Please stop this. Come home. We can work this out. We can get the tattoo removed. We can start over." "Too late for that," I told her, my voice cold. "You made your choice." "I'm your mother," she cried. "I'll always be your mother. I love you, Daniel. Nothing you do will change that." I hung up on her, but her words haunted me. I told the group about the call that night, expecting them to reinforce my anger, to remind me why I was right to hurt her. And they did, sort of. But Ryan pulled me aside afterward, his hand heavy on my shoulder. "You're doing good work with your family," he said. "But there's more important work to be done. There's a family that just moved into the neighborhood, if you know what I mean. Wrong kind of family for a place like that. Maybe it's time you proved you're really one of us." I knew what he was asking. I knew what wrong kind of family meant in his vocabulary. And for the first time since I'd joined the group, I felt a flicker of uncertainty. Spray painting my parents' house was one thing. They had hurt me, cast me out. But these people, this family he was talking about, they hadn't done anything except exist in a way Ryan didn't approve of. "I'm in," I heard myself say, because what else could I say? These were my brothers now. This was my family. If I said no, where would I go? I'd burned every bridge behind me. There was nowhere to go but forward, deeper into the darkness I'd chosen. The night we went to that family's house, I told myself I was just along for the ride. I was just there to prove my loyalty, to show that I was really one of them. But when Ryan handed me the gas can, when he told me to pour it along the back of the house, I did it. My hands were shaking, but I did it. And when he handed me the matches, when he told me to light it, I did that too. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times in my mind. The scratch of the match against the box, the way the flame danced in the darkness, the whoosh as the gasoline caught, the orange glow spreading along the wall. We ran then, piling into the car and speeding away, but I looked back. I saw the flames reaching up toward the windows where children were probably sleeping, and for the first time since I'd gotten that tattoo, I felt truly sick. "Good job, brother," Ryan said, clapping me on the back as we drove. "You're really one of us now." But I wasn't, not really. Something had broken inside me when I lit that match. I'd crossed a line I couldn't come back from, and I knew it. The guilt sat in my stomach like a stone, heavy and sharp. I thought about that family, wondered if they'd gotten out okay, wondered if there were kids who would have nightmares about fire for the rest of their lives because of what I'd done. That's when I decided to go back to my parents' house. Not to apologize, not to make amends, but to finish what I'd started. If I was going to be a monster, I might as well be a complete one. If I was going to destroy lives, I might as well start with the ones who had created me. I went during the day first, when I knew they'd be out. It was a Friday, and they'd be at temple preparing for Shabbat. I still had my key, they hadn't changed the locks. The house smelled the same, like furniture polish, and my mother's perfume, like home. I stood in the entryway for a moment, remembering all the times I'd come through that door. First days of school, coming home from baseball practice, sneaking in past curfew. Then I went to work. I destroyed everything that mattered. The family photos first, shattering the frames, tearing the pictures into pieces. The china my mother had inherited from her grandmother. The dishes that only came out for special occasions, I threw them against the wall one by one, watching them explode into fragments. The books my father collected, first editions he'd saved for years to afford, I ripped the pages out and scattered them like snow. But it was the religious items that I took the most time with. The silver menorah that had been in my mother's family for generations, the one her grandmother had somehow managed to hide during the war, I bent it until it was unrecognizable. The Torah scroll my parents had saved for years to donate to the synagogue, in my name, I unrolled it and tore it to shreds. Each act felt like I was tearing away another piece of my soul, but I couldn't stop. I was possessed by a rage that went deeper than anger, a need to destroy everything that connected me to who I used to be. When I was done, the house looked like a tornado had hit it. I stood in the middle of the destruction, breathing hard, waiting to feel satisfied. But all I felt was empty, hollow, like I'd destroyed myself along with everything else. That night, I went back. I waited until I was sure they were asleep. Then I crept around the back of the house with a gas can, just like Ryan had taught me. I poured the gasoline carefully, making sure to cover the back porch, the wooden siding. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I felt strangely calm, like I was watching myself from outside my body. I lit the match, watched the flame catch, watched it spread. But as the fire grew, as it climbed the walls and reached for the windows of my parents' bedroom, something inside me snapped. This wasn't some stranger's house. This was where Rebecca slept, where she had her stuffed animals lined up on her bed. This was where my mother made challah every Friday, where my father read his books in his favourite chair, where I'd taken my first steps and said my first words. "No," I whispered, then louder, "No." But it was too late. The fire was hungry, consuming everything in its path. I ran to the front of the house, pounded on the door, screamed for them to wake up. I saw lights coming on, heard my father's voice shouting, saw my mother's terrified face in the window. They got out, all of them, stumbling onto the lawn in their nightclothes as the fire department sirens wailed in the distance. My mother saw me standing there, saw the gas can in my hand, and the look on her face wasn't anger. It was devastation, complete and utter devastation. "Oh, Daniel," she said, and those two words held more pain than any scream could have. I ran like the coward I was, but I didn't get far. The police found me at Marcus's apartment the next morning, and I went with them without a fight. There was no point in running anymore. There was nowhere to go. At the trial, my parents sat in the gallery, my mother crying silently while my father stared straight ahead. They had to testify, had to tell the court about the vandalism, the destruction, the fire. My mother could barely get the words out, breaking down when she had to describe finding our home in ruins, finding the torn Torah, the destroyed menorah. "That menorah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was the only thing my grandmother managed to save. She hid it for 3 years, buried in the ground, and now it's gone. Not because of the Nazis, but because of my own son. I wanted to apologize then. I wanted to fall to my knees and beg for forgiveness, to tell them that I'd been lost, that I'd been stupid, that I'd chosen the wrong family. But I sat there in silence, playing the role I'd chosen for myself, the rebellious son who felt no remorse. The judge gave me 5 years. As they led me away in handcuffs, I looked back one last time. My mother was sobbing in my father's arms, and Rebecca was nowhere to be seen. Later, I learned that she'd refused to come to the sentencing. She'd told my parents she didn't have a brother anymore. Prison is where you have time to think, too much time. At first, I held on to my anger like a life raft, telling myself I was a victim, that I'd been persecuted for my beliefs. But anger is exhausting, and eventually even I couldn't maintain it. The group I'd thought was my new family. They disappeared the moment I was arrested. No visits, no letters, no brotherhood when it actually mattered. Marcus sent one message through another inmate. Don't mention our names. Meanwhile, my mother wrote to me every week, every single week, without fail. At first, I didn't read them. I let them pile up in my cell, unopened accusations I wasn't ready to face. But loneliness has a way of wearing down your defenses, and eventually, I opened one. My dear Daniel, it began, I hope this letter finds you well. I pray for you every day. Your father says hello. Rebecca is doing well in school. She misses you even if she won't admit it. I've enclosed some pictures of the new house. It's smaller than our old one, but it's becoming home. She wrote like nothing had happened, like I hadn't destroyed everything she held dear, like I hadn't chosen hatred over her love. She wrote about ordinary things, about the weather, about the neighbours, about the cat they'd adopted who liked to sleep in the sunny spot where my bedroom used to be. She never mentioned the fire, never mentioned the tattoo, never mentioned the pain I'd caused. I started writing back after 6 months, just short notes at first. I'm okay. The food here is terrible. Thanks for the pictures. But she kept writing, kept sending her love through the mail, and gradually my letters got longer. I told her about the books I was reading, about the job I'd gotten in the prison library, about the therapy sessions I'd started attending. I never told her about the nightmares, about how I'd wake up gasping, smelling smoke, seeing flames, about how I'd dream about that other family, the one whose house I'd burned first, and wonder if they'd all gotten out safely. I never told her about the crushing weight of guilt that sat on my chest, where that tattoo still marked me as something I wasn't sure I could ever stop being. One day she wrote something different. Daniel, I need you to know that I forgive you. Your father and I, we both forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because you're our son, and we love you. Love isn't something you can burn down. It's not something you can destroy with spray paint or gasoline. It survives, even when everything else is ashes. I cried when I read that, sat on my narrow bunk and sobbed like I hadn't since I was a child, because I finally understood what I'd had and what I'd thrown away. I'd traded unconditional love for conditional acceptance. I'd chosen people who valued hate over people who valued hope. I'd literally burned down my home trying to prove I didn't need one. The tattoo is still there. I see it every time I shower, every time I change clothes. I've looked into removal, but it's expensive, and more than that, I'm not sure I deserve to have it gone. Maybe I need the reminder. Maybe I need to see it every day and remember what happens when you choose hatred over love, when you let anger make your decisions, when you mistake destruction for strength. I've been here 3 years now, with 2 more to go. My mother still writes every week. My father has started adding notes to her letters, brief messages in his careful handwriting. Stay strong. We're proud of you for going to therapy. The Yankees are having a good season. Rebecca hasn't written yet, but my mother says she reads my letters, so I keep including messages for her. Apologies, mostly. Memories of when she was little. Promises I'm not sure I have the right to make about being a better brother when I get out. Ryan and the others from the group. I found out they were arrested 6 months after me. Turns out I wasn't the only one they'd convinced to burn things down, and eventually someone talked. I testified against them, told the court everything about how they recruited angry young men like me, how they dressed up hatred as philosophy, how they slowly led us deeper into darkness until we couldn't see the light anymore. Some people would say testifying was betrayal, but I don't see it that way anymore. The real betrayal was what I did to my family, to that innocent family whose home I burned, to myself. Telling the truth about the group was the first step toward making amends, toward trying to balance the scales, even though I know they'll never truly be even again. I think about my mother's hands sometimes, how they felt on my face when I was young, how she'd cut my cheek and look at me like I was the most precious thing in the world. I think about my father teaching me to throw a baseball, his patience infinite as I missed catch after catch. I think about Rebecca crawling into my bed during storms, trusting me to keep her safe from the lightning. I had a family that loved me unconditionally, and I traded it for a group that only loved me as long as I was useful to them. I had a home filled with tradition and meaning, and I burned it down for an ideology that was nothing but dressed-up hate. I had parents who would have died for me, and I nearly killed them because they couldn't accept a symbol of the very hatred that had murdered their ancestors. There's a rabbi who comes to the prison sometimes, Rabbi Goldstein's nephew, ironically enough. I avoided him for the first year, but eventually curiosity got the better of me. We talk now, once a month. Not about God or religion or tradition, we talk about choices and consequences. We talk about hatred and how it disguises itself as strength. We talk about the difference between being chosen and choosing. Your mother says you were always a questioner, he told me once. That's not a bad thing. Questions are how we grow, but you have to be careful who provides the answers. He was right. I'd been so desperate to find somewhere I belonged that I'd let the wrong people answer my questions. I'd let them tell me that strength meant dominance, that heritage was chains, that love was weakness. I'd let them convince me that burning bridges was the same as building new ones. I know now that I'll carry what I've done forever. Even when I get out, even if I manage to rebuild some kind of relationship with my family, I'll always be the son who chose a symbol of hate over his mother's love. I'll always be the brother who made Rebecca afraid in her own home. I'll always be the man who lit those matches, who watched those flames spread, who chose destruction over creation. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we need to carry our worst moments with us, not as punishment, but as reminders. Reminders of how easy it is to lose ourselves, how quickly anger can turn to hatred, how a single choice can spiral into a cascade of devastation. Maybe my scars, visible and invisible, can serve as warnings, to myself and others, about the cost of choosing hate over love. My mother wrote last week that they're planning a small Passover Seder this year. It won't be the same without you, she said, but we'll set a place for you anyway. Because that's what you do for family. You leave the door open, you leave the light on, you wait and you hope, and you never stop loving even when love feels impossible. I cried again when I read that, because that's what I'd never understood about tradition, about heritage, about family. It's not about chains or obligations or suffocating rules. It's about connection. It's about belonging to something bigger than yourself. It's about love that survives even the worst betrayals, even the deepest hurts, even the hottest fires. 2 more years. 2 more years to figure out who I am without the anger, without the group, without the easy answers to hard questions. 2 more years to prepare myself to face the people I hurt, to try to make amends that might never be enough. 2 more years to understand that strength isn't about dominance or breaking free from tradition. Real strength is admitting when you're wrong. Real strength is choosing love even when hate feels easier. Real strength is coming home, even when you're not sure you deserve to. I don't know if my family will really take me back when I get out. My mother's letters are full of forgiveness, but forgiveness and trust are different things. It takes a moment to burn a bridge and a lifetime to rebuild it. But I'm going to try. Because that's what you do when you've learned the hard way what really matters. You try, you fail, you try again. You keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep choosing love over hate, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Sometimes late at night, I still smell smoke. Sometimes I still feel the weight of that gas can in my hand, still see the flames reflected in my mother's tears. But now, instead of feeding those memories with anger, I let them remind me of what I almost lost forever. I let them push me to be better, to do better, to never again mistake destruction for strength or hatred for belonging. My name is Daniel, and I'm the son who betrayed his family in the worst possible way. But I'm also the son who is learning, slowly and painfully, what it means to truly come home. Not to a house, because that's gone, reduced to ashes by my own hand, but to the people who love me despite everything, who leave the door open and the light on, who understand that sometimes we have to lose everything to understand what really matters. And what matters isn't the symbol on my chest or the ideology in my head. What matters is the love that survives even our worst choices, the family that endures even when we try to burn it down, the tradition that isn't about rules but about connection across generations. What matters is choosing to be better tomorrow than we were yesterday, choosing love over hate, choosing to come home even when we're not sure we belong there anymore. 2 more years, and then, God willing, I'll walk through that open door, sit at that waiting place, and try to earn the forgiveness I've already been given. Because that's what you do when someone loves you enough to keep writing letters to the son who burned down their home. You become worthy of that love, one choice at a time, one day at a time, for the rest of your life.